Hey everyone, my name is Christoph Jakob. I'm a music composer and sound designer for video games. In today's video, we're gonna break down all the different vocal approaches that I've used in my Splatoon-inspired albums, including the brand new Splash Ultimate. Furthermore, I'd like to show you how to replicate vocals from the Splatoon franchise in general, as well as give you some tips and tricks on how to make them sound more convincing. Before we jump into the vocal performance itself, let's get a few things out of the way. All of what I'm about to tell and show you is based on my own experience as a composer and sound designer. Don't forget that recording, performing, mixing and mastering audio are all art forms, so this isn't gonna be the one and only right approach. Step 1. Preparations. While you don't need a fancy microphone to be able to achieve high quality results, try not to use your phone or laptop speakers. I recommend getting a cheap condenser mic. They're affordable and get the job done well. Make sure that you record yourself in a space that's not super wide and open. Recording yourself in a hallway or bathroom will lead to terrible sounding recordings. You can always add reverb later if you really want to have that, but you can't remove reverb without having a significant loss in audio quality. Some basic room treatment goes a long way. You don't necessarily need foam panels, bass traps and all that stuff. A few simple things like carpets, curtains, maybe having a sofa or other pieces of furniture will also greatly increase the quality of your recordings. When it gets to recording itself, try to get a somewhat balanced recording. Want to sing louder? Maybe move away from the mic a little. Try not to make the mic clip and distort. It's better to have a recording that's too quiet than one that is too loud. You can always boost the volume and loudness later. Step 2. Vocal performance. The vocal performance itself plays a crucial part in the entire process. I'd argue that it's probably even more important than all the squibbly squabbly woomy effects that we're going to talk about in a moment. We're going to cover both talking and singing voices. The main difference between the two is your performance, not the vocal processing. If your recording lacks character and charm, woomy, squib, squeal, squabba, the final vocal will sound like, in my case, some dude who lacks character and charm.
Woomy, squib, squeal, squabba.
Don't be afraid of making a fool of yourself. Try to get your vocal as close to what you want to achieve without using any post-production. Woomy. Woomy. Woo, woo, woomy, woomy. Woo, woomy. Oh. Woomy. If you want to sound like an Inkling Girl, lean hard into a shrill and squeaky sound. For the Octoling Girl, try the same approach but reduce the amount of squeak and try to sound a little more soft and warm. For the Octoling and especially Inkling Boy, try to sound like a rebellious teenager, but keep your voice rather low.
Squid squeal, squid squeal, squid squeal.
We're going to pitch these voices up a bit, so don't worry if your recording doesn't sound right just yet. If you can't or don't want to record your own voice, you could also use software like Synthesizer 5, for example, and mess around with Vocaloid stuff. The vocals in Chirpy Chips songs, for example, seem to have been made using a synth as well. The language spoken by Inklings and Octolings also plays a huge role in whether your vocals sound super convincing or rather not. Many words in their spoken language sound like the word squid. Here are some examples, once again without any effects yet.
Yiddy, polypup.
Man make me. Bank account. Yippee! This way quickly.
I recommend using actual voice lines from the games as a direct reference for your own voice lines. Step 3. Vocal processing. Like I said earlier, this is just my approach to squidifying vocals. Experiment and most importantly,
You gotta be kidding me, not now.
don't forget to have fun. In the following segment, I'd like to walk you through 10 different vocal approaches. What I'm about to show you is not perfect by any means. My voice naturally has a different tone and timbre than the person who actually voiced the Splatoon voice lines. I do think that the approaches are fairly decent though. Here's what it sounds like without any effects. It's pretty funny. The first thing that I add is a gate. That is optional though. All that a gate plugin does is basically remove background noise. Next, let's add a pitch shifter. I'm not actually raising the pitch, I'm only really raising the formant. Next, let's add Fruity Love Filter, an oscillator kind of plugin. Just play around with the envelope, cutoff and resonance filters. And of course the speed of this wobble wobble wobble. After that, I usually add an equalizer with a peak that's moving up and down rapidly. If you're using FL Studio, all you need to do to automate something like that is right-click, in my case, Not 7, and click Create Automation Clip. Then you can pretty much play around with the automation down here. As of right now, it still sounds too shrill and squeaky in my opinion. There's also too much low end, so let's get rid of that by using another EQ. Here I'm basically getting rid of every single frequency below roughly 400 Hz. I'm also boosting around 1K quite a bit. And because it sounded way too shrill for my ears, I got rid of a bunch of high end. And finally, I slapped a de-esser on top. A de-esser plugin does exactly what it sounds like. It makes harsh sounds like S and T a little softer. If you listen to Splatoon 3 sounds specifically, as well as the Squid Sisters, Off the Hook and Deep Cut, you may notice that there's a much more prominent low wobble, as I like to call it. This sounds especially good on actual spoken words. Here's what it sounds like without any effects.
Surprise! Sekies, Aluska, Ashahonohesia, Heomenecheket, Wamoshu, Peimoshio Tentacle.
Basically just random gibberish. For this approach, there's only really one major difference, and that's the EQ with a peak that's rapidly moving up and down. Instead of this EQ peak moving up and down between like 6 and 10K, it is strongly emphasizing the mids, so somewhere around 1 to maybe 2K max. I've also made the automation significantly faster. So basically, if you prefer the Splatoon 3 sound over Splatoon 1 and 2, try to put much more emphasis on the mids. This is what my Octoling Girl sounds like. This is what it sounds like without any effects. Once again, just like me, but a little softer than the Inkling voice. The mixing chain is quite similar to that of the Inkling Girl. However, there are a few key changes. The oscillation in Fruity Love filter is just a little faster. Furthermore, the EQ with the peak that's moving up and down rapidly isn't moving up and down between like 6K and 10K, but more between 1K and 2.5K. Listening back to references, that's at least what it sounds like to me. And lastly, the Octoling Girl seems to have more low end and a few more mids as well. Oh yeah, and in case you've been wondering the entire time what the final plugin in my chain does, I'm basically compressing the audio, which means quiet parts are a little louder and louder parts are a little more quiet. And at the same time, I'm boosting the volume and loudness in general. If you naturally have a rather low voice, Inkling Boy should not be that difficult for you.
Yes! Yiddy! Splowy! Brow!
Here's what it sounds like without any effects.
Yes! Yiddy! Splowy! Brow!
The mixing chain is once again fairly similar to that of the Inkling and Octoling Girl. We're starting with the gate plugin, then we use a pitch shifter. This time I'm raising both the pitch and the formant a little. Oh, and as always, set the formant correction to 100%.
Yes! Yiddy! Splowy! Brow!
That's already really close. After that, I'm once again adding Fruity Love filter. This time I'm keeping the oscillation fast, but not super in your face.
Yes! Yiddy! Splowy! Brow!
After that, I'm adding another de-esser because I naturally have the tendency to overpronounce S sounds for some reason.
Yes! Yiddy! Splowy! Brow!
And finally, we're getting rid of the low end, basically everything below 200, and I'm also lowering the frequencies around 3 to 500. And once again, remove that shrill sound that's around 4K and 7K, I'd say, roughly.
Yes! Yiddy! Splowy! Brow!
Next, let's talk about the Octoling Boy. Personally, I find this to be the hardest of the bunch.
Jory! Remo! Yes! This way! Ah!
This is what it sounds like without any effects. Jori, Vimo, Yenyas, Biswai, Yuki. As always, after adding a gate to get rid of the background noise, let's add a pitch shifter. Depending on your natural speaking voice, the amount that you have to pitch the voice up or down obviously differs. I'm basically pitching the voice up by an entire octave. I'm also raising the formant a little.
Jori, Vimo.
The settings that I use inside Fruity Love Filter are identical to that of the Inkling Boy.
Jori, Vimo.
This next step is completely optional, I'd say. You could basically add this plugin on any of the voices we've talked about so far, which is basically a plugin that slightly bit crushes the vocals.
Jori, Vimo.
After that, I'm adding ring modulation, and I'd argue that this is probably the most important aspect of the Octoling Boy voice. It has such a strong and fast
Jori, Vimo.
Next, I'm getting rid of every single frequency below roughly 200. I'm also massively boosting the voice around 2K, and in return, we're lowering it around 4K again.
Jori, Vimo.
Finally, the equalizer with a peak that's rapidly moving up and down is actually identical to that of the Octoling Girl.
Jori, Vimo.
Next, let's break down the voices of Mr. Grizz, Sheldon, Captain Cuddlefish and so on. Judging from the game files, these voice lines seem to be split up in very short and small samples. These samples are then randomized. Let's make up the voice for a 30-year-old German Inkling. First, I just record a random German sentence.
Verzeihung, hätten Sie vielleicht ein großes Schnitzel für mich? Ich liebe Wurst, Bier und Autos.
After that, chop up the samples into small pieces.
Verzeihung, hätten Sie vielleicht ein großes Schnitzel für mich? Ich liebe Wurst, Bier und Autos.
And finally, randomize the samples. Here's what a random sample of a German Inkling could sound like. Let's start with probably the easiest voice of them all.
Squore mi fa sol la ci squo, squore mi fa sol la ci squo.
Here's what it sounds like without any effects.
Squore mi fa sol la ci squo.
It's just my voice, as you can hear. To replicate this kind of vocal, all you need is a pitch shifter and an EQ.
Squore mi fa sol la ci squo.
First of all, if you have a voice that's similar to mine, pitch it up by an entire octave.
Squore mi fa sol.
Sol la ci squo. Squore mi fa sol la ci squo.
This sounds a little too chipmunky, so next we want to lower the formant.
Squore mi fa sol la ci squo. Squore mi fa sol la ci squo.
Set the formant correction all the way to 100.
Squore mi fa sol.
Sol la ci squo, squore mi fa sol la ci squo.
Finally, and this is really minor, get rid of the low end.
Squore mi fa sol la ci squo.
I'm starting to roll it off at around 215 Hz, and there's basically nothing below 125 Hz or so. Here's what the Turf Twins sound like. Here's how the Turf Twins sound like without any effects. Both are sung by myself, by the way. The vocal processing for both voices is almost identical, so I'm only going to walk you through one of the voices. First, as always, let's add a pitch shifter. This one is really subtle. All I'm doing is slightly changing the formant of my head voice. Next, let's once again add some. After that, I'm adding an equalizer that completely cuts off the entire low and high end. I'm cutting off everything below roughly 500 Hz and everything above roughly 12K. Next comes another equalizer with a peak that's rapidly moving up and down again. It looks a bit different than all the other ones so far. I'm not just temporarily boosting a specific area, but I'm actually completely cutting it off for split seconds. That's simply a stylistic choice, I'd say. Next, I'm gonna add a teeny tiny little bit of ring modulation, just like in the Octoling Boy voice, but more subtle than that. Now it's time for heavy auto-tune, and I'm also killing basically all the dynamics. Finally, we're getting rid of potential low-end stuff that might have been added along the way. And as a final, with a 2 in brackets step, we're gonna make it sound a little more interesting in the mix by adding delay. Let's talk about a brand new band from Splash Ultimate. The Bass Blades, or Bass Blades, I'm still not sure how I actually want to call them. So I'm just calling them both. The vocal approaches that I'm using there are easily my favorite across all 3 albums. Let's start with the Sprechgesang rap-like vocals. This is what they sound like. Here are the vocals without any effects. First, you know it, let's start with the pitch shifter. The settings are almost identical to the ones that I used for Squid Squad. I just turned down the formant even more. The next step is adding autotune and killing the dynamics. As for EQ, I'm cutting off the low end, but not as extreme as with all the other voices so far. However, I'm cutting off basically the entire high end, everything above like 7K. I want it to sound muffled and intentionally not clear. I'm making up for the loss of the entire high end by adding a distortion plugin. As the final step, I decided to round it off with delay, but only during specific words. This is what the singing voice in the second half sounds like. I love it. This time we're actually not starting with a pitch shifter. It does get used later though. Who gives a f? This is how pathetic the voice actually sounds like without any effects. It's basically just me using my head voice, and I pitch corrected it to death. I want it to sound artificial. First, EQ again, where I cut off the lows and the highs. Next, we're gonna use the second EQ. My plan was to once again set up a peak that is moving up and down rapidly. However, I actually forgot to automate it, but I decided to keep it like that. Now I'm killing the vocal again with autotune and compression. Next, we're pitching the voice up by an entire octave and slightly lowering the formant. As always, don't forget about the 100% formant correction. That leaves us with the Fruity Love Filter oscillation. A final EQ and a fairly strong delay. The final couple of vocal approaches that I'd like to show you are a little more obscure, starting with IKA-RI from my album Splash 2. That's what the main lead vocal sounds like. This time we're actually starting with a pitch shifter again. We're raising the pitch by an octave and we're slightly lowering the formant. Next, I'm adding a frequency shifter, something we haven't talked about at all so far, that shifts frequencies. The way I'm using it, it's super subtle though. This is what it could sound like if we make it a little more obvious, by the way. After that, getting rid of the low end and the high end. Autotune and compress it. The next thing that I did was adding a vocoder and a talkbox effect. I had no idea at all what I was doing. I was basically just turning knobs until I liked what I heard. And finally, I've added delay. The second track in that voice has the exact same processing. It's just sung by a different person, a good friend of mine, Tronix. Finally, let's talk about the vocals in Zebrafish, also from Splash 2. This is another pretty unique approach, I'd say. Here's how the vocals sound like, sung by Yoshi UMR, by the way. This is what it sounds like without any effects. I know I'm starting to sound like a broken record by now, but let's get rid of the low end and the high end. The peak in the second EQ is really high up this time. After that, kill the shit out of it with autotune and compression. Here comes the unique part. We're raising the pitch by an octave, and while it seems like the formant stays the same, we're actually automating the formant, which sounds like this. Finally, we're adding delay, and we're getting rid of potential low-end mud. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, this time we actually have 3 almost identical recordings, not just one, which makes a huge difference in the sound. Step 4. Creative fine-tuning. Here are a couple of smaller things that I tend to do when I write Splatoon-inspired music. This isn't necessarily something that the Splatoon devs do. These are simply little things that I like from a sound design perspective. Emphasize the consonants and harsh sounds. Boosting all the k, ch, sh, f, t, s sounds can add high end and thus clarity to your vocal performance. We all associate Splatoon vocals with a lack of low and high end, but you'd be surprised just how much high end is in there actually. While you could use something like a transient shaper plugin for that, I actually go through every single recording manually and only pick those moments where I want a word or phrase to stick out a little more. I also recommend compressing the vocals so that none of the sounds stick out in an unpleasant way. Furthermore, I personally don't boost, or don't even use at all, words with a pa, pi, poo, with a P sound. When your splat band has 2 singers, I do exactly what happens in Off the Hook or Wet Floor songs, for example. Pan one of the voices 50% to the left and the other one 50% to the right. This makes it easier to distinguish the 2 voices as there's more clarity in the mix. If you have a third singer, you could just leave them in the middle. Add delay to your lead vocals, not reverb. This is definitely a stylistic choice and also personal preference to a degree. But if you do want to add some space to your vocals, use a delay plugin. Delay works kinda like an echo. Reverb, however, puts your vocals into a specific space like a garage, bathroom, hallway, cave, etc. If you only add reverb to 1 or 2 instruments, they can quickly feel out of place, at least in my opinion. Reverb can also easily muddy up your mix, especially if you use it excessively. Thanks for watching. Like this video and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Do let me know down in the comments below what your favorite approach is, or if there's something that you don't like. Would you be interested in seeing more videos like this? And if so, what would you like me to cover? If you like fan-made Splatoon music, go check out my 3rd Splatoon-inspired album Splash Ultimate. This album is full of made-up multiplayer bands, a Salmon Run band, and even a Splatoon Raiders band. If you're watching this video before July 16th, 2026, just have a little more patience. You can already listen to 3 of the songs though. And we're gonna have a Splash Ultimate listening party on Saturday the 11th. If you're watching after July the 16th, say hi from the future. Did humans go extinct yet? Thanks, and I'll see you all next time.